When age becomes a throne and wisdom becomes a wall, progress becomes a prisoner, and a continent that should run begins to crawl. In the heart of Africa, where the sun rises with age-shaped dignity and sets with 1,000 untold stories, there exists a silent system, a system that dresses itself in the clothes of wisdom, yet often chokes the breath of progress. It is called gerontocracy, the rule of the old, the supremacy of age over ideas, and the reign of experience over evolution. This is the African paradox, where the land is young, vibrant, and restless, yet its leadership remains old, static, and stubborn. A continent whose middle age is less than 20, but whose power is held by men in their 70s and 80s. This is a structural mismatch, as dangerous as running modern software on an obsolete operating system. Across Africa, a quiet struggle brews between the energy of youth and the endurance of age. In 2025, as Cameroon's contested election unfolded under the long shadow of Paul Biya's rule, the scene captured something larger than one nation's pain. It echoed a continental condition. From Yaoundé to Harare, from Kinshasa to Kampala to Malabo, the same refrain could be heard beneath the noise of politics. When wisdom hardens into wars, the young begin to push. Africa's story has always carried a rhythm of renewal, yet its leadership often plays a broken record of repetition. Countries rich in youth vibrancy are governed by men who confuse longevity with legitimacy, as though years in power automatically translate to relevance in a rapidly growing world. In Cameroon, protests erupted like sparks from dry grass, reminders that when old refuse to yield, the pressure of youth becomes a combustor. This is not merely a Cameroonian tragedy. It is Africa's radio. Similar patterns have been seen in Sudan's 2019 uprising and Algeria's Iraq movement, where long-standing leaders were forced to confront the limits of age-based authority. How can a continent so young remain led by hands so weary? The question burns through its cities and parliaments. Can a generation born with smartphones be ruled by those who still trust typewriters? Can the dreams of the digital age fit inside the filing cabinet of the past? Gerontocracy in Africa is not just political, it is philosophical. It is the belief that time itself must bow before tradition, that change must wait for permission from memory. But as the continent's heartbeat quickens, that belief is beginning to crumble.
Strength of Africa TV presents
When wisdom builds a wall instead of lighting the way, and crowns grow roots that refuse to decay, a continent of rhythm is forced into delay. Young fire in their veins, but no voice to say. Let the future breathe while the past holds the key. Hands on the clock won't set the people free. From Yaoundé's echoes to streets that won't sleep, the silence of the elders makes the pressure run deep. Don't turn wisdom into chains, let it be a flame. Pass the torch, don't just call the name. We rise, we call, we won't stay small. The future's knocking down the wall. Africa, hear the youth ignite. Blend the dawn with the ancient light. If we stand divided, we fall in the fight. But together, we rewrite tomorrow tonight.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Depending on where you are at this moment, I'm your host, Adebayo Oladokun, and this is Strength of Africa TV, where truth meets courage, where the past is reawakened, and the future of the motherland is reclaimed. Today's episode is titled, the African gerontocracy syndrome, when age becomes leadership wall. Let's start with the roots of age and power. In African culture, age has always been revered. The elder is the custodian of wisdom, the guardian of tradition, and the symbol of continuity. The saying goes, what the elder sees sitting, the young cannot see it even when standing. This was a value, a beautiful one, until it became a tool of control. What began as respect gradually turned into reverence, then into fear, and finally into silence. In the house of power, age stopped being a symbol of guidance and became a gatekeeper of authority. In many traditional communities, decision-making was reserved for councils of elders. Over time, that structure transformed into political culture. Even as Africa won its independence from colonial powers, it kept a form of internal colonialism ruled by age. Across the continent, the respect once reserved for the storyteller has been transferred to the state house. The elder, once a teacher, became a gatekeeper. In places like Cameroon, that transformation found political permanence. The Council of Elders became the Cabinet of Ministers. Reverence became rule. This pattern is the same from the Sahel to the Savannah. What began as wisdom became war. What began as guidance became government. The men who fought for independence across the 20th century mistook their liberation from colonial hands as a license for perpetual reign. They freed their lands, but not their chairs. And so, Africa kept an invisible chain, not of iron, but of inheritance. Age became a quiet empire, colonizing the future. The young were told to wait, to listen, to learn, and they did. But as the decades turned, waiting began to feel like wasting, and silence began to taste like surrender. Now, let's dive into when experience becomes exclusion. Gerontocracy is not just about age, it's about access. When the old rule for too long, they create systems that reward age and punish ambition. In many African countries, political power has become a heritage passed from one old hand to another. Presidents who have ruled for decades, parliaments filled with familiar faces, institutions built to protect age, not innovation. Across Africa, access has become inheritance. Leadership is not earned but transferred, not by vision but by age. Parliaments echo with names that have weathered decades of power. Ministries rotate within the same circles. Parties become family heirlooms rather than platforms for renewal. The result is a continent where wisdom sits in palaces, while ideas languish in unemployment lines. This is how power becomes a closed loop. In many African countries, political parties function like private clubs. Entry requires not just loyalty, but time served under the very structure one is expected to challenge. Young aspirants were told to wait their turn, but the queue never moves. Consider this. A 25-year-old African entrepreneur can build a multi-million-dollar tech startup in 5 years. Yet, that same individual is considered too young to hold public office. The system trusts youth with economic risk, but not with political responsibility. This is not caution, it is contradiction. Let's pick names, not to shame, but to understand. Leaders like Robert Mugabe, who ruled for nearly 4 decades. Paul Biya of Cameroon, still in power since 1982. Teodoro Obiang Nguema, who has been in power since 1979, represent not just individual tenure, but institutionalized stagnation. These are not just leaders, they are symbols of a system that equates longevity with legitimacy. The issue is not their age alone, it is the absence of succession architecture. When systems are built around individuals instead of institutions, transition becomes crisis instead of a process. When history refuses to pass the torch, it ends up burning the future. Let's examine the cause of stagnation. Gerontocracy comes at a price, and that price is paid in lost futures. It is paid when a Nigerian software engineer relocates to Canada because local system cannot support innovation. A Kenyan data scientist finds more opportunity in Europe than in Nairobi. A Ghanaian medical doctor chooses the UK over Accra. This is not just brain drain. It is system failure exporting its best talents. In economic terms, Africa invests in education but exports productivity. In political terms, it trains leaders but promotes loyalists. In social terms, it raises dreamers but rewards survivors. In economy, it creates old policies for new problems. In technology, it rejects the digital voice of a new generation. In politics, it breeds corruption disguised as stability. How can a continent that dreams of artificial intelligence be ruled by men who still trust file cabinets over cloud systems? How can Africa dream of industrial revolution when its leaders still cling to agrarian mentalities? Age without evolution is a burden. Experience without renewal is a curse. In many African universities, young professors struggle to rise because the elderly refuse to retire. In politics, young aspirants are mocked as boys or children. The message is clear. You are too young to lead, too energetic to be taken seriously. And so, Africa bleeds talent into this diaspora. The young minds that should be building the continent are building someone else's future abroad. A continent cannot leap forward when its feet are shackled by nostalgia. A look at the false wisdom of the old order. Many African leaders hide behind the idea of experience. They claim that only age brings stability. Experience without adaptability is not wisdom, it is obsolescence. True experience should function like software updates, continuously evolving to meet new realities. But in many cases, it functions like firmware, locked, rigid, and resistant to change. Leaders who once symbolized liberation now sometimes embody limitation. The tragedy is not that they led, it is that they refuse to stop leading. Experience is valuable only when it evolves. Across Africa, power justifies itself through age, claiming the authority of time while denying the urgency of change. Leaders call themselves fathers of the nation, but many have forgotten that fathers must eventually let their children grow. A tree that refuses to bend will break in the storm. Africa's storms are changing, economic, digital, social, but its trees stand too stiff. The young are told to wait for their turn, yet their turn never comes. The political structures designed by old men continue to produce old men. They write laws that favor themselves, set retirement ages that never apply to their seats, and control party systems that strangle youth participation. A continent that once danced to the rhythm of liberation songs now hums the monotony of maintenance. The old guard calls it continuity, but the youth recognize it as captivity. Like trees refusing to sway, the rulers shriek snapping when the winds of change finally rise. This is why African politics sometimes feels like a retirement home, filled with tired ideas, old alliances, and fading energy. Let's look at African philosophy on time and change. Our words against our actions. Africa's own wisdom warns against the danger it now faces. Every tradition on this continent recognizes the rhythm of renewal. From the Ethiopian notion of rebirth to the Akan proverb that says, a tree does not grow taller by clinging to its old leaves. Yet, politically, many nations are frozen at the moment of their liberation, mistaking independence for immortality. African philosophy has always honored the cycle of life: birth, growth, decline, renewal. Even the baobab tree, though ancient, grows new leaves each season. This is a civilization contradiction. A continent that teaches renewal in proverbs but resists it in power. True leadership is not holding on. It is preparing others to take over. Yet in leadership, Africa has forgotten this cycle. It has frozen time at the peak of the ode, refusing to renew its leaves. Let us remember these words. When the elders refuse to teach, the youth learn from their mistakes. The river that refuses to flow forward will stagnate and smell. Wisdom is not age, it is the courage to learn and unlearn. Age should guide, not govern. Experience should advise, not arrest. To honor the cycle of life is to make room for renewal. True elders do not fear succession, they prepare it. True wisdom does not resist time, it flows with it. The continent must remember, renewal is not betrayal, it is balance. Let's look at the longevity blueprints. Africa does not just have long-serving leaders, it has a long-serving system. From Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo in Equatorial Guinea since 1979 to date, to Paul Biya in Cameroon since 1982 to date, to Yoweri Museveni in Uganda since 1986 till date, and Denis Sassou Nguesso in Republic of the Congo. What we are seeing is not rotation, but entrenchment. These are not just individual stories. They are patterns of power that have outlived generations. This pattern is not accidental. It is engineered through 4 repeatable mechanisms. 1. Constitutional manipulation, where term limits are extended or erased. 2. Dynastic succession, where power moves within families in places like Togo, Gabon, and Chad. 3. Security control, where military and intelligence structures protect regimes rather than democracy. And 4. Economic capture, where state resources are used to reward loyalty and suppress opposition. Together, these form a closed system, self-sustaining, self-protecting, and resistant to change. The result is a system that does not expire. It simply extends itself. In some cases, leaders have remained in power longer than the majority of their population has been alive. This is not stability, this is stagnation, disguised as continuity. And until this blueprint is broken, every election will feel like change but deliver the same result. My people, how can we break this cycle? The future of Africa depends on its ability to blend age with energy, tradition with transformation. The continent must not pit youth against age, but rather fuse their strengths. The wisdom of endurance with the energy of innovation. The young must rise, but with respect, not rebellion. And the old must step aside with honor, not humiliation. Africa does not need a war of generations. It needs a bridge between them. A system where the elders share their stories and the youth write new chapters. When the torch is passed peacefully, the fire continues to burn. When it is clung to greedily, it dies in the hand of the holder. In Cameroon, the 2025 unrest offered both warning and wisdom. It showed that when leaders refuse to transition, transition will take itself. Yet, it also revealed a hunger among the young, not for destruction, but for dialogue. A yearning to build, not to burn. Across Africa, the bridge between generations is cracking, but it can still be rebuilt. The old must learn to step aside without shame, and the young must rise without resentment. For when the torch is passed in peace, the flame grows brighter. When it is rescued by force, it burns the bearer and the beholder alike. Africa is a land that never grows old, only its leaders do. Its soil remains young, its songs remain new, its people remain restless with possibility. But leadership too often has aged faster than the land it governs. The challenge is not merely political, it is psychological. Gerontocracy is the fear of time, the illusion that holding on preserves meaning. Yet, as Cameroon's unrest reminded the world, time always collects its debt. Gerontocracy is not just a system, It's a mindset. And until that mindset changes, the continent will continue to age before its time. But there is hope in every young voice that refuses to be silent, in every elder who decides to mentor instead of monopolize, and in every nation that chooses renewal over rotation. Let Africa be led not by age, but by vision, not by memory, but by purpose, not by years lived, but by lives touched. Let the continent remember, the wisdom of age is a lamp, not a lock. The youth are not the storm, they are the season. And the nations that learn to blend both will not just survive history, they will shape it. Breaking gerontocracy requires more than passion, it requires structure. This includes term limit enforcement, youth inclusion policies with real authority, institutional succession planning, political parties reforms. Without this, calls for change remain rhetoric. The goal is not to remove elders, it is to redefine their role, from rulers to mentors, from gatekeepers to bridge builders. And so, we arrive at a defining moment not just for Africa, but for its future. A continent standing between two paths, one where power continues to cling to the past, and another where wisdom finally makes room for renewal. Because the truth is unavoidable. No nation rises by holding on forever, and no generation thrives by being asked to wait forever. The question is no longer if change will come, it will. The only question is whether it arrives through wisdom or through pressure. There's still time to choose a better path, one where elders mentor instead of monopolize, where youth are prepared not just to follow but to lead, and where power is passed with honor rather than protected by fear. Because in the end, wisdom was never meant to be a wall, it was meant to be a window, and the future is not distant, it's already knocking. For in the end, as the wise say, a nation that fears the youth is a nation that fears its own tomorrow. I'm your host, Adebayo Oladokun, and this is Strength of Africa TV. If you found value in this conversation, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Endeavor to join our membership and give us super thanks. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Rumble. For advert placement, visit us online at Strength of Africa TV. Watch out for the next episode. You don't want to miss it. Until then, tell your own story, because Africa's future is written in African ink. Stay rooted, stay bold, stay African. Thank you for watching and see you in the next episode. Bye.
Gerontocracy, the rule of the old.
When wisdom builds a wall instead of lighting the way, and crowns grow roots that refuse to decay, a continent of freedom is forced into delay. Young fire in their veins, but no voice to say. Let the future breathe while the past holds the key. Hands on the clock won't set the people free. From Yaounde's echoes to streets that won't sleep. The silence of the elders makes the pressure run deep. Don't turn